Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a bizarre, almost unbelievable reality. Imagine an American town that's, well, quite literally trapped in Canada's basement. It's this wild place where the mail is just weird. Groceries cost a fortune, and honestly, it feels like geography itself played a massive practical joke on everyone living there.
Okay, let's dive right in. Picture a completely normal morning routine, right? You're an American kid in a nice, quiet suburb. You wake up, grab your backpack, and hop on the school bus. But to actually get to your high school, you've got to cross an international border. Not once, but 4 times, every single day.
I know, right? What the hell is actually going on here? You literally have to pack a passport just to make it to first period math, and then do the whole shebang all over again just to get back home for dinner. It really makes you wonder how this absolute logistical nightmare even happened. Like, how did a simple line on a map create a US town that you can't even drive to without crossing through Canada first? So here's how we're going to break this down. 1. The daily border commute. 2. Drawing a lazy line. 3. Life inside the exclave. And 4. Why keep Point Roberts? Let's jump right into section 1, the daily border commute, and the crazy logistics of just going to school. Just think about the sheer amount of bureaucracy required just to travel within your own country's school system. I mean, step 1, you've got to remember your federal ID before you even grab your backpack. Step 2, you leave the US and enter Canada. Step 3, you drive entirely through a chunk of British Columbia. And finally, step 4, you re-enter the USA just to go sit at your desk. It is a stunning, mind-boggling amount of red tape for a basic morning commute. Moving on to section 2, drawing a lazy line, the 1846 border agreement.
So back in the 1840s, the US and Great Britain were fiercely arguing over exactly where Western Canada ended and the US began. But then, in 1846, instead of looking at the actual ground, where people lived and how the land was naturally shaped, they kind of just drew a straight line right across the 49th parallel. And in doing so, they completely failed to realize that this line sliced right through the very tip of the Tuamotu Peninsula. Talk about a massive, permanent geographical oversight.
It really perfectly captures the totally flippant, casual nature of how these world-altering borders were hammered out. The US basically said, hey, everything south of this line is mine. And Britain essentially just replied, deal, I'm gonna go get a tea. They literally called it a day without realizing they just sliced off this tiny little tip of a peninsula and completely stranded it. Now, if we compare this to other borders around the world, the absurdity really stands out. Unlike the super polite, carefully negotiated zigzag borders you see in places like Märket Island, which were designed to accommodate everyone fairly, the 49th parallel is just this lazy, straight line that totally ignores actual geography. Honestly, this map-making error is basically the equivalent of building a lighthouse in the exact wrong spot. Except instead of just an empty building, they did it with an entire community. All right, section 3, life inside the exclave, surviving the bubble. So Point Roberts, Washington is what geographers actually call a true exclave, meaning it's a piece of one country that is entirely severed from the mainland by another country. Geographically speaking, it's kind of like the Chile of towns, just heavily squeezed by international bureaucracy on one side and the massive Pacific Ocean on the other. And to make matters even more claustrophobic, Point Roberts is incredibly tiny. We're talking less than 5 square miles. Imagine living your entire life in a space smaller than a major airport, totally disconnected from your home country. It makes simple everyday tasks so unusually complicated. Seriously, just consider the real-world impact on something like healthcare. Let's say you have a medical emergency and you need a standard US hospital. Well, you're forced into a 40-minute drive through British Columbia. And the biggest hurdle? You literally have to clear foreign Canadian customs from the back of an ambulance. You are constantly at the mercy of international border agents just to get your basic domestic services. Which brings us to section 4, why keep Point Roberts, economics and the status quo. Now, looking at all this daily hassle, you're probably thinking, why not just hand it over to Canada and finally fix the map? Well, much like the really complex identities of shifting borders in places like the Balkans, national identity runs deep. It's really never as simple as just grabbing an eraser and fixing a line. So what's actually developed instead is this weird symbiotic ecosystem where everyone just kind of makes it work. The US residents, they are fiercely attached to their national identity. They want to keep their laws, their post offices, their citizenship. But meanwhile, Canadian visitors actually love having Point Roberts right next door, mostly because they can just pop over the border specifically to buy cheap American gas. All right, let's summarize what we've learned from this incredible geographic glitch. First up, clean borders on a computer screen are often completely chaotic on the actual ground. Second, the residents here live a reality where totally mundane daily routines require strict federal ID checks. And finally, Point Roberts stands as a permanent, living reminder of 19th century map-making laziness. So hey, the next time you're complaining about your morning commute to grab a Starbucks, just remember the folks who have to show a federal agent their passport 4 times a day. Let's end with this thought to take away. When you consider the perks, like cheap gas and a super tight-knit community, but then weigh that against the endless passport stamps and the geographic isolation, is the world's most awkward peninsula a place you'd ever call home? Like, would you live in a town where you're basically trapped in another country? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it completely changed how you look at a map.